Greetings, Fat Hobbiters, and welcome, precious. Tonight, we'll be talking about horror. Oh, God. Sorry. Okay. Hello, everyone. We're going to be doing a little bit of a continuation of the Badger Show, just talking about horror in general and all the fun stuff that entails that genre of movie. So we have some people who would like to discuss their ideas, including Mr. Wayne.
Hello there.
We have Biotic Warlock. We have a Magic Bubblehead.
Of course, you have it.
And we have LG Classical. So,
obviously, yeah.
I think that, Wayne, you mentioned a couple of things. The main thing being soundtracks. So why don't you speak to that?
Well, I mean, I can kickstart the conversation with that. I think that it's such a massive part of horror and the horror genre that the soundtrack, and we're talking about everything from iconic music pieces like in Jaws, but also you've got the soundtrack from something like Friday the 13th, the iconic laugh, and I'm sure everyone knows what I'm talking about, but if you don't, it's the
yeah, right.
And without that, it all adds to the kind of claustrophobia that you have from the tight angle shots and the use of fog and darkness and the depth of view. But there's loads of other things that go into it. We've got some feedback coming from somewhere. Oh, Kedrick's joined us. Hello, Kedrick.
Sorry, you were saying, Wayne?
I say Aloe. So yeah, this is a great start. So yeah, the soundtrack in a horror film, it's one of the key components, but it's not the only one. I mean, there are a lot of other things to it.
The sound effects perhaps could enter into the same categories.
I see it's gonna be a running gag. You guys not calling me Aloe, isn't it?
That's right, Kedrick.
Yeah, I think the right music can actually really accentuate or make a scene way more horrific than if the music is bad or not present. So it can be a really good factor in horror movies. So yeah, I agree with Wayne. It's obvious.
Yes, you could probably teach me about horror movies. My mom's afraid of horror movies, so I'm not allowed to watch them. Well, I wasn't, but now I'm older. So I didn't get much experience with them.
Yeah, it seems a lot of people have been joining now, so not sure.
Yeah, well, I sent an invite to some friends, so we should be getting some new people. But everybody close the link of the Hangout if you have it open, so I can actually get an idea if there's anybody watching. Anyway, so horror soundtracks, iconic ones. Wayne?
I'm going with Jaws. I think Jaws is the perfect example of that minimalist, that tune which just, I mean, as soon as you hear it, you're automatically, it just sends the chilling fear of the unknown and the hidden threat underneath the waves.
Right, and also I would say Halloween.
Even though this movie might not be horror in a sense, I do believe the classic scene from Psycho, also that music really makes that scene when in the shower. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's the combination of the action going on.
Music.
Yeah, exactly. It's and music's used like that. And it's not just horror that obviously benefits from that. It's other genres as well. We've got somebody on the chat on the stream who's looking for the details to join. So maybe someone can go and sort him out with those.
Okay, I'll do that. You guys talk.
Okay.
Okay, so Wayne, why don't you talk about some of the things you said that the Honey Badgers were leaving out?
Before that, I will actually bring out some point concerning the music. Yeah, I think that it should get a blend of band artists, music, and soundtrack. Because if it's all orchestral, you're missing like a real life element to it. And if it's all like metal and and shit, then it diminished like the horror factor. So a blend of both is probably the best to go for.
Well, when I talk about a movie soundtrack, I'm talking about precisely those things. It's not just the musical themes. We're talking about the clever use of sound effects to. Okay, so it's an art in itself. The art of sound effects in movies. Choosing the right sound for footsteps on a gravel path in the fog, the ability to do that, and to also edit the sound afterwards and make it sound as you want it to do. There is so much into that, there are entire technologies that have developed in order to make that a reality as well. Trying to match the themes that you're listening to and the sound of the themes that you're listening to with what you're watching on screen. I mean, we could go on for hours about just about the use of Foleys and sound stages.
Yeah, I know, but I wanted to add like real life like bands that are currently or not, or old bands music like rock and roll or something, to add an element of realistic to this, because if you are riding a car and it's all orchestral, I don't think it's really realistic, you know.
It's not, but you can get scenes that that benefit from just having music. There's examples of that in actually we played one earlier on, which I can't remember if you were here for it, but it was the scene in the church from Kingsman, where that soundtrack, the use of Freebird in that, it's apart from the obvious ironic connotation of it. It just matches the action perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's that song that makes the scene rather than anything else. I mean, there's other things that make the scene. Obviously, it's a very cleverly shot bit of work, but apart from that side of the direction, without that soundtrack with a different song, would it work as well?
Yeah. I don't think so, because sometimes you got to be clever with it. You know, like they were speaking quickly about Dario Argento. They don't mention it a lot, but actually in his work they had like his own team, his own created team, and it was really 80s, but suiting to the mood of his movie, perhaps.
Yeah.
So,
And see, Clark says we should use, or somebody should have Queen music in a horror movie.
Oh.
Use it for the pure
I
contrast.
can
Can
see,
you imagine that?
yeah, I can
Oh.
see Bohemian Rhapsody somewhere.
Well, what
That'd be
about Shaun of the Dead? Would you count that as a horror movie, or would you count that pretty much as a comedy? Because I see it as
like a combination, pretty much.
yeah. I see it as a twisting. They mentioned this on the Badger podcast about basically the elements of comedy and horror that are the same, or that twisting of the narrative, that surprising twist at the end. And comedy and horror both rely on that, where you take reality and you twist it through 90 degrees and come out with something which has an effect on the viewer or on the listener.
Yeah, it's like using like Disco Inferno in a scene where you're burning kids with a flamethrower.
Yeah, it's that
Yeah,
juxtaposition. It absolutely is.
Yeah, I actually think that's one of my favorite kinds of freaky horror, because it makes me feel it makes it feel real, because that's something that you could see like happening. Like imagine, for example, a scene where like Magic, I think Magic just said it, where Disco Inferno is playing and then they're burning some fucking like kids or something, and you could picture that as something that would actually like happen, because that music could be playing somewhere. Whereas like with creepy soundtrack music, it's like it adds sort of an inauthentic vibe sometimes, and it can make you remind you that you're in a horror film. Whereas like copyright music, you'd be like, oh shit, like this is just like somebody. This is just like somebody just doing this. And it's
Sure,
like, this
but
could be happening.
that's why you actually have to be very good with the appliance of that horror music. So not overusing it, but using it at the perfect time, which actually doesn't take away from the event, but actually adds to it and makes it more stronger in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's also which kind of horror movie you're going for. If you look to something more realistic, something with a serial killer or something, you will put actual real music into it. But if you look to something more surreal, you can do like Dario Argento does his own music, or you can do it orchestral too. You know.
Yeah, that's something you do see. Like a lot of horror movie directors actually do their own music sometimes. That's pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah. What's a really good movie?
Can I
Go
just
ahead, Wayne.
interrupt? We've just been joined by Mario on the stream, so
Yes.
can we welcome
Say
him?
hello, Mario. Okay. You might
Oh,
have to
it's
sort out
me! It's him, Mario!
you might have to sort out his mic issues. So, Mario, when you get a chance, just let us know that you're here in the chat, and we'll introduce you.
Actually, he looked like a real-life Mario. That's pretty scary.
He kind of does look like a real life Mario, like with the hat and everything. He could totally be Mario. I don't. Where's Luigi? That's the question. Anyway,
Yeah.
so what is the best horror film in everyone's opinion? And you don't have to be not like you can be genre specific if you want.
The Shining.
Really? Go ahead. Can you explain why?
Because it's got it ticks all the classic boxes. I mentioned this in the chat on the Honey Badger stream, but I'll repeat it here. I think the key component of horror, and something that all of them kind of skirted around, but I don't think really touched on, is the feeling of isolation. So you've got it in like the Alien series. You've got the distance away; they're unsupported. You've got it in movies like The Thing. Anywhere where you set the scene where you have this distant. Position where you know that help isn't a phone call away, you've got no chance whatsoever, and you've got to fight your way through to the end. You know, the protagonist has to go through hell in order to escape from whatever situation they're in. But in the case of The Shining, I like the fact that basically the twist is that we're introduced to this main character who is both the protagonist and the villain, or rather the embodiment of the villain, which is that isolation, that psychological trauma, which leads to him, leads to him going over the edge. And to me, that's why it's just that isolation, that cut-off feeling. You have the isolation of a small boy who is in this massive house. This massive building, just kind of cycling around the corridors and hallucinating or seeing things we don't really get that explained to us. But to me that movie ticks everything. It's almost the perfect horror movie.
That's actually one of the few horror movies that we actually talked about that I'd seen, because I am not a huge horror aficionado. In fact, my experience with horror is like Paranormal Activity. I mean, like excluding like classic stuff that everybody's seen. I mean, like I've obviously seen Halloween and the Nightmare on Elm Street and all of that stuff. But like excluding that, I've only ever watched. I'll tell you one thing. I was actually scared by Paranormal Activity because I was that much of a pussy.
Yeah, but also something I would like to note about The Shining is that whilst also being a very good just movie in general, it's also very well acted and has a good, very special cinematography. Sorry, which is also adds to the horror of the film. And I actually think it's actually it's a very scary movie, even though I think there are probably more brutal movies than this one. But it's just such a suspense-building movie that it's very, very scary. Yeah, it's a very good movie. Yeah. Shining.
Also, Let the Right One In was one that they touched on that is a really good horror film. So I've heard. I haven't actually watched the whole thing. I've only seen the commercials for the remake because that's when I heard about it actually. And it was apparently an amazing film. Does anyone have anything to say about that?
No.
I
don't really remember.
I thought Wayne, don't you have like a million things to say about what the Badgers were leaving out?
But I think Mario's mic is working.
Mario, you got some background noise there, but say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so we have a new guest. Mario, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And why are you here?
Okay, well, I've been following the Honey Badgers for a while. I don't actually ever upload anything to YouTube, but I follow quite a few channels. I love horror films. I love films in general and music as well. I used to be a mechanical and electronics engineer. Also a certified automotive technician. That's what I did.
Okay, cool.
And I
So,
wanted to hang out with you guys and talk about horror flicks.
It's your chance to prosperity right now.
There we go.
But actually, before we move on another topic, we should finish what everybody's favorite movie is.
yes, everybody's favorite horror film. So we only got Wayne's.
No, for me, actually, I share Wayne's opinion. For me, it's probably The Shining, because just the general atmosphere of the film is for me perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna have to change mine now because we can't agree on anything, man. That's just not on.
So, real quick, I just want to address our small audience that's actually watching today. Welcome to Triggered. We are a temporary post show for the Honey Badgers and transitioning into a full-time podcast. We are basically a free forum for anybody who wants to come on and speak. So if you've ever been sitting and if you watch a bunch of videos all day and you're looking at different people and you're listening to them and you're going, you know, I really have a lot to say to this, but there's no way for me to say it, then this show is for you. I want you to come on, and I want you to come and join us and, you know, hang out and talk and have a great time. That is the point of this show. So if you're interested, please contact me at Eric D. Hicks on Twitter, or you can find me here on Google Plus or YouTube. So, sorry. Everybody's favorite movie, Biotic?
I haven't actually watched that many. Main ones being Alien franchise, also Scream and Final Destination. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to say favourite out of all of them since I've barely watched any, but I do kind of like the Scream franchise for some reason. It doesn't seem as anywhere near as random as Final Destination. There is a bit of point to it, I found.
Right. Okay. Cool. What about Mario? Do you have a favorite horror film?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's really horror. It's more, I guess, along the lines of horror comedy, but I would definitely have to say, you know, Big Trouble in Little China is an absolute favorite that I'd never tire of.
Very fun movie.
What about
Actually, I should give it that a try. It's been a long time since I watched it.
Yeah, it's a very fun movie to watch.
somebody
indeed.
describe the premise to me?
The premise of Big Trouble in Little China?
Yes, I have never seen it.
Oh my god, you're missing out. You owe it to yourself to watch it. So, a really quick rundown of the premise of Big Trouble in Little China. Kurt Russell plays a truck driver. He makes a delivery to an acquaintance of his in San Francisco that owns a restaurant, stays up all night gambling. His friend owes him money, and hijinks ensue. In order to get the money, he has to keep the guy with him. They end up going to pick up the guy's girlfriend that's coming fresh off the plane from China at the airport. She gets kidnapped by an Asian street gang. They go to try and find her. Wars ensue. Supernatural elements enter in. It's amazing. It's just really, really fun.
Okay, sounds awesome. Sounds like something I should check out. Magic, what's your favorite horror film?
Me, I will say, totally out of spot like this, I will say Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, 1986, the one.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, because it's an element of pretty much everything into it. It's got comedy, it's got chainsaw duel, it's got some legitimate stalker, rapey guy scene. It's overblown. It's crazy. I like it.
It's a genre. It's a genre-defining movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that brings up another thing I'll bring up after we get through this. But okay, Kimoy, do you have a favorite horror film?
No, I actually don't have a particular favorite horror movie. Usually, I guess since the point of horror is sort of scary, and I don't really enjoy being scared, it's sort of strange to really say this one I like. I guess I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, I hear what you're saying. What about Aloe? Do you have a favorite horror film?
I haven't seen many but I guess the same as Magic Bubblehead would probably be mine. The main Chainsaw Massacre series.
Another great choice. I mean, the Chainsaw Massacre movies are fucking they're just so brutal, but they have an element of surrealism and comedy to them that brings them. I don't know.
I think that the 1 and 2 are the legit ones. The other ones are really diverging for the
Can somebody, if you have the stream on in the background, make sure you turn. Yeah, please. Okay,
Um,
sorry, Magic. You want to finish that thought?
Yeah, but actually, to something that legitimately scare me as much more further in my adolescence was The Ring.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
The Ring, but I was on chemical drug when I watched it. But it was pretty scary.
Well, okay. This is something because I don't have a lot of experience with the horror genre, so I wanted to. This is going to be throwing this out there, but a movie that's kind of got elements of horror in it is. It's got elements of every genre. It's Clockwork Orange. Would you guys consider that partly horror film? Just because of like the psycho,
Brutal scenes.
the brutal scenes, the rape scene, it's the just the way it's presented. I feel like part of it because it's sort of an exploration of a murderer's mind. So it's not really a horror film per se, but it's
Yeah.
sort of, I don't know.
If you want the real version of an explorer thing of the serial killer mind, you got to watch Henry.
Oh, okay. That's one I should check out then.
But
So-
yeah, that movie is more like a dystopian universe. So it's
Yeah.
more in the category of Fight Club and stuff like that.
Clockwork Orange, yeah, I'd class it more as kind of a dystopian science fiction movie than anything else.
So,
Yeah, I would agree with that, mainly because if you kind of look at the film, it's definitely dystopian, but at the same time, it's kind of an exploration of, not an exploration. I'm sorry, it's a juxtaposition of the typical horror movie trope, which is adults can't be trusted, and Clockwork Orange is more along the lines of you should fear the youth because they're capable of all these things.
What trigger your goosebumps? That's a good question, huh?
Goosebumps, oh man, I could talk about Goosebumps forever. Goosebumps was terrible, but beautiful.
No, not the TV series, but actually I have goosebumps.
Oh.
What give you goosebumps?
Yeah.
I remember a movie that really scared me because I actually watched it when I was young was The Exorcist. Fucking scared the shit out of me when I was young.
Same here.
Yeah, it's a fucking scary movie, man.
Actually, the sound of a scream when it's badly recorded, I think it gives me goosebumps. Especially when there's a raw effect in the background or something.
Yeah.
Well, I was, like I said, I was scared by, like a little bitch, I was scared by, what's it called? Paranormal Activity 1. I was terrified by that when I first watched it. Mainly because at the time I still believed in ghosts.
But
So-
to be honest, the first one was probably one of the more scarier ones, but afterwards they just got stale.
Yeah, I never got scared after the first one, but the first one I literally for a long period of time couldn't watch it alone because it would terrify me. And that's like the only movie I could think of in the horror genre that of recent that like I couldn't watch. Like I literally couldn't watch it. I can now, but I couldn't before.
Yeah.
Oh, we
Yeah.
got a new guess. What's his favorite movie?
Oh,
Horror
Will,
movie.
Will, do you have a favorite horror film?
Have we gone over? I'll list something that people probably haven't mentioned. Have you guys ever seen Event Horizon?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
The film with
it's
Time
by
Neal.
no means a great movie, but it is genuinely fucking creepy.
Yeah, no, Event Horizon was fantastic.
I put it into the same category as Sphere, which is I would class that as a horror movie as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's slightly more along the lines of a psychological horror, but I thought the whole premise of that film was great. Plus, Sam Neill, again, did an absolutely fantastic job. I know in the previous stream somebody mentioned his work on In the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah.
It was kind of a similarly unsettling feeling, that he was able to evoke in Event Horizon. I agree. I thought it was a great movie.
So that's an interesting question. So do you guys think that there is such a thing as a horror movie that isn't psychological? Because like they're sort of like gross out and jump scare horror movies, and I don't know. I don't. I don't feel like they're giving me the full Monty, but the one that actually makes me feel all creeped out and uncomfortable the whole time, without gore or things jumping out at me, I think that's the real horror movie.
It's the suspense that you build up, that kind of that suspenseful feeling of a horror that an intangible kind of fear of things. I tell you a movie we haven't mentioned. I don't think the Badgers mentioned it either. Is what do you guys think of 1 Hour Photo? Where would you put that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure.
Oh, that's
It's got the unsettling going.
we got the host of the Only Badger show live on here. Brian Martinez is for you.
Hey,
Favorite horror movie and why?
what favorite horror movie for me?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
shit, man! You put me on the spot.
Instantly on the spot.
I mean, I love a lot of different ones.
You have to choose.
What horror film makes you like? Is there any horror film that's still out there that you can't watch because it scares you that much?
Oh no, there's none. No, none. I think the most sometimes like there was a couple of Japanese horror films that scared me because I didn't understand what the fuck was happening. So it's scary because when you can't apply logic to it in a way, it was weird. Like Ju-on was pretty fucking scary, as well as Ju-on was probably like one of the scariest. But I don't know, man. Like nothing's really been that scary. Although I am interested, and there was this movie that I keep hearing about called It Follows, and everyone's saying that that's supposed to be really fucking scary.
I watched that one. For me, it wasn't that scary, to be honest. But
Yeah, I just watched it last week as well, and I found it to be kind of irritating more than anything else because there was never any reason, there was never any purpose for what was happening. So the way that my girlfriend and I saw the film was basically like the goal was to pass along a supernatural STD and hope it didn't come back to get you.
I would say that in recent memory, a pretty good flick that I watched was VHS, the first one.
Oh, I never saw that.
VHS was great.
Yeah, I think it's like Blair Witch Project, but shit happened in it. So yeah.
So you recommend that? That's a good one, huh?
Yeah, that's a good one. You should watch it. Seriously, it's like 5 stories, but they are not connected. It's people playing VHS. It's like the real life kind of perspective, if you will.
Yeah.
But the story are pretty compelling, especially the first one with the girl that constantly say "I love you." It's crazy. I won't spoil it, but it's good.
So, do you think maybe it's this is an age thing? I think there are movies that I watched when I was much younger that I think the reaction was much stronger, and as I've got older and more cynical, the movies aren't so much scary as a horror movie. You're more likely to laugh at it in response to the horror. So when you get that shocking reveal, or when you get that twist, or when you get the gory kind of death,
that's
you're more
why
likely to laugh
I
at it.
like the psychological horror movies because
Right.
they don't need to get the jump scare out of you to still be horror movies, right? Because they will still creep you out, and they'll just sit there and just be sort of menacing, and it's like that growling dog. Like you might like the dog is behind a gate, you can't get out, and you're not afraid of him really, but he still changes the atmosphere. And that'll get you for the rest of your life.
I think what you're describing is probably somewhat more along the lines of it produces something that's unsettling to the viewer that'll stick with you. And I think I mentioned in the Badger chat music, and Foley work, the sound and the music and use of color are massively important in that respect. If you have the right music for something, it can completely change the impact of it.
Right, and I mean the best example of what you're saying, of course, would be Jaws, which is one of the
we've-
all-time great. I know
Right.
people have probably gone over this a zillion times. but
We have. We were actually, one of the things we were discussing, and welcome to the show, by the way, Brian. It's nice to have you here. But one of the criticisms that we were discussing during the show was that you guys didn't really go into too much detail over the soundtrack and the music that's used in horror. And you bring up Jaws there. We were talking about this when we first started this show. And it is. I think it's the most important factor is the kind of the look, the directorial choices that you make, the lighting and the atmosphere of a movie, of a shot.
Absolutely, I think that atmosphere is everything. It was just that everybody wanted to. You know, I agree. I think that we could have done some things like talk about all the elements that make for a really good horror movie, because, and I was trying to introduce that when I said, what makes a good one, how can we look at it, because and this is the thing too, is something that I wanted to say that we didn't get to. We're actually talking about it in the post chat with the patrons, but like
Right.
how the evolution of horror over the years has made it more difficult to do horror today, because there's things that have been done already. There are, there's like the changing times, and maybe in a way, it's sort of like everything else. Like violence. What we considered violence in the 50s and 60s doesn't compare to what we consider violence today. Like everything scales up. And I think that maybe because humans are just sort of like natural at adapting to everything. It makes it harder to keep people interested. You have to
That brings us back onto Clockwork Orange, doesn't it? I guess.
Yeah, well, it kind of does. Why don't you go ahead on that, Wayne?
Well, it's that idea that, I mean, as you all know, it was banned. Well, famously, Kubrick withdrew the movie himself. But the criticisms that were levied against that movie, if you released the Clockwork Orange now in the form that it was released, nobody would bat an eyelid.
It would be considered pretty tame.
It really would.
Yeah.
But
And,
see,
like, who are the most extreme guys that we have now? Eli Roth, right? He's coming out with I don't know. He's coming out with some movie that looks like it's about cannibalism or something, but I don't really know. He's the guy who did Hostel and stuff like that. And he was always, like, his whole thing is, how do I push the envelope, And I wonder if
Right.
it's just
do you think that that's a trap, though?
What do you mean by a trap?
I think horror isn't about throwing some cow intestines around and like having a guy with a knife. I think it's about, because if you like, Jaws is still scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because you fear the stupid animatronic shark. It's because the soundtrack and the suspense are still there. And if instead you play all that jazz up, I mean, like Alien, the original Alien is another good horror movie. If you just stick with that, then you're not in this endless one-upmanship thing with the violence, and then the violence is fine. But at a certain point, yeah, you get desensitized to it. But the creepiness and the unsettling, I don't think you get over that.
Well,
Yeah, well, I think it's not what you show; it's what you don't show.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Like when I was listening to the show, I made a massive list of things. I basically went through a list of, if you like, tropes of different things in the horror genre, and they don't obviously all apply to every movie. But one which is I always notice this, and I don't know if you guys do as well. It's that shot where you have a cameraman who is he's got kind of a handheld or a moving camera hiding in behind a tree or behind a building or inside a building, looking at the protagonist, usually from behind, as they're kind of looking around, peering into the darkness, looking for something.
Yeah, it's like
And
stalking.
Yeah, that kind of stalker camera, that stalkery vibe. Whereas you the viewer, are basically in the your avatar is the perspective of this unseen watcher, and this whole element of things that aren't immediately apparent, things that you can't see. It's such an important thing, and Jaws again is a great example of that.
I would venture that another fantastic example of that. Even though you knew who the boogeyman was, is in the original Elm Street.
Yeah.
There were multiple different times throughout that film where they, as the audience, you actually had a little bit of that sense of dread because of the way that the camera was moving and how they were following the cast, that somebody was watching even when there was nothing there. And to kind of just very quickly touch on an aspect of what you mentioned about the need to ratchet up the gore, I think a big reason why that may have happened is probably because we have much less censorship now than we did previously. We had laws in place for what you could and could not show, what you could and could not say, both in television and in film. And so when you get down to it, I think they just had to be a lot more creative in creating that sense of a tense atmosphere, whereas now they can splatter the camera with blood and just show you instead of insinuating.
It's not only this, but there's also the element of people knowing more and more stuff. Knowledge. What you know is not scary as much as what you don't know.
Yeah, it's not just about the gore. It's also about pushing back the boundaries of what is considered to be taboo in society. So things that were taboo 30 years ago no longer are. You couldn't shock somebody in the same way, or you couldn't build that suspense in the same way because of taboos. So I think that there's an element of what Brian touched on, where people are looking around, and when you're pushing the envelope, it's not just about what can you get away with, but what particular societal taboos can you examine in any kind of depth.
I mean, what are people scared of that actually you can relate to as many people as possible? That's why I mentioned Invasion of the Body Snatchers. If you watch it, it's very, very tame. But we're not living in a time where people were really afraid of communism, which is what that movie is about. The original one, and that's why the when they remade it in the 70s, I believe, it didn't do as well because it didn't have that as the crux of what it was trying to say. I mean, we were still involved in the Cold War, but it wasn't as scary to us, so it didn't have the same impact.
Well, it was a post-McCarthy, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, you're right. There was no longer that looming threat.
And going to your point about slasher movie, I know that you mentioned the Jason series and stuff.
Yeah.
I would say that there's an appeal to that too because it makes you sympathize with the antagonist.
With Jason, because that was something else I mentioned in the post chat. Once the people were asking, why did they take characters like Jason and Chucky and Freddy and stuff and make them into so humorous, where they got away from that whole aspect? And I said, well, the beauty of horror is the less you know about something, the scarier it is. But as movies make more sequels, you get to know the antagonist better than any protagonist, because protagonists usually don't survive, one movie. Some of them have survived more than one movie, but most of the time they don't. And so you don't really get to know them, but you get to know Jason, you get to know Freddy, you get to know Chucky. So we end up appealing or relating to those characters more. So what they end up doing is they end up finding new ways to the writers and stuff. They end up finding new ways for us to come back, and the main reason why people come back to Friday the 13th is because they want to see how Jason kills people. And to help with that, they actually make the campers that come to Camp Crystal Lake to get killed, they make them less sort of likable. So they turn them into, they're there for drugs, they're there for sex, and they're assholes, and they play pranks, and they're mean to each other. So when Jason kills them, it's like retribution.
It's a thing that you can relate to to a certain extent, like example in Candyman,
Yeah.
The second one, I think they explain his backstory. It's compelling to a certain extent. So it's like drama novel for guys, basically.
Essentially, yeah. They make Candyman into this tragic figure, and that helps for that movie. Now, I think it can still be scary because you still are dealing with something that you don't completely understand, and I think that mystery is what makes it appealing. But I think that's why inevitably when you have movies that are very successful and then become victims of their own success because they end up making sequels, and most people can't look at the films on their own merit, but instead they look at it as a franchise. So people who look at Child's Play as a franchise or Nightmare on Elm Street as a franchise, they might say it sucks because there were more bad movies than good ones. Friday the 13th also suffers from that. But when you look at it as individual films and you can understand why things went the way they did, because you have this weird conundrum where there are people who want to make a really good horror movie and they have a very successful property on their hands, and then they have an audience that wants more of that thing. Because people want more Jason, more Freddy, more Chucky, more Pinhead, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so they give them more of that, and as a consequence of that, though, they're going to lose. The scariness is going to go away.
That's why the Halloween franchise suffer, I think.
Going off on a tangent here, do you think maybe that's a part of why people were turned off by the Star Wars prequels? It's the idea that you've taken this iconic figure of Darth Vader and completely dispelled the myth. You've removed any doubt. You've given him this backstory that turns him into a whiny little adolescent.
There are so many things wrong with those things that it's almost impossible to point at anything in it and go, well, that's what did it. I mean, that whole part of the franchise was the submarine made out of Scream Bros.
Well, I think that for me anyway, I do think that sometimes it's better that things be left unsaid or unknown. Like, I didn't need to know everything about Darth Vader because it did take away from, like, before I saw the prequels, and I know that, again, I'm an older guy. I grew up on the original trilogy, and that, of course, instills a bias. And I only say that because I know a lot of young people, like really young, they grew up on the new movies, and they love them. So I think that it's almost as though the prequels were made with children in mind, with the children of that generation. But when I watched Star Wars, not quite knowing what was under that mask until the very end of the last film, not quite knowing how this person could be this way, not fully understanding the Force, because they didn't even explain it, in a way that was really clear. All these things, they ignite the imagination. They make you, ask questions. They make you wonder about this stuff. But as soon as they explained it in the prequels, all of that was gone. Like, now I know what, at least I thought, now I know what stormtroopers look like. Now I know where they come from. Now I know, before they made the prequels, when you saw Darth Vader, you couldn't even imagine him as a child. The concept of that was...
It's the man behind the curtain, isn't it? It's the Wizard of Oz thing. As soon as you pull the curtain back, then the wizard is no longer this scary, all-powerful being. It's suddenly just a very simple old man who's a little bit bitter and angry.
So let's get a little more elemental.
Well, it's once you...
what do you think the point of horror is? I'll just throw my opinion in here. I think what we're trying to do is to evoke that primal... prey reaction. You're for a moment you're being made to feel like the rabbit.
You want to feel like you want to lose. Well, I think it's a feeling of losing control, sort of. In fact, I was recently looking at some creepy YouTube videos. We watched one on the stream once, and it was the top 5 creepiest YouTube channels. And I've been trying to scare myself with that stuff, and it's I find the thing that creeps me out. And that's really what I'm looking for, is not understanding and complete I don't know, am I making any sense? It's
yeah.
Losing control is a big thing of I could see that.
Well, because the rabbit has no idea. I mean, look at that little bastard. He's the perfect horror movie victim, right? Because he's got these awesome legs. He's got really giant ears, and eyes are on the sides of his head. They're on the sides of his head. His whole existence is a horror movie.
So are we saying it's basically a disempowerment fantasy?
Yeah, I think so actually.
Well, I mean,
Something it's almost
it's a victim fantasy. It's a you are the rabbit.
yeah. You want to be scared. You want to be
Vulnerable.
You want to be vulnerable. It's exactly. You want to lose. Like, okay, for me, the only reason that, like, say, for example, back when freaking Paranormal Activity scared me, the reason that it scared me is because back then I wasn't sure what to think about ghosts, and so, for example, like the scream in downstairs, it evokes that reminder and that feeling of like being a little kid and not knowing what's in the basement and having to go and explore the basement on your own. And it's like that's I feel like what in terms of horror film, I'm trying to get that feeling, that feeling you get as a kid again.
That innocence, that isolation that you get, like isolation for me is a big part of that. It's about cutting you off from the support structure, and I think one of the things that this is a common trope that I wrote down in the list is when you take an authority figure in a horror movie, say a policeman, and either that policeman turns out to be one of the bad guys, or he's very, very quickly and effortlessly dispatched by the big nasty evil thing that's coming to get you, and suddenly all of your myths about safety and security are completely dispelled because this thing is this implacable, unstoppable foe that's going to get you.
Yeah.
I have a random, like, okay, I want to talk about this, and then this is my show, so I'm doing it. So, horror video games. What do you guys think about that?
A really good one is really good.
Which one?
If it's a really good one, then it's really well done, and that has to do that thing that we were just.
One you're like Guinness.
I'm gonna give
Among
you guys
the Sleep.
Among the Sleep is a great one. I'm gonna give you guys a controversial one though, because it's really not a great horror game. In fact, you could argue it's one of the worst horror games and horror series out there that's new, and that is. But I like it because of the story, and it also has that just Five Nights at Freddy's. I know
everyone likes that series. I mean,
I really enjoy it, and I'll tell you guys why. Its story is so in depth and deep, but it's not on the surface. You have to go searching for it. So if you were to there are two ways to enjoy the series. You can either just like play it, and like they're like these kind of pop-up horror games with jump scares, and you're like, oh, okay, it's kind of interesting. Or you can go and you can like look at all the incredible details and piece together this puzzle piece of a story that fits together so neatly, and it's creepy and it's disturbing, and it revolves around the murder of 5 children. And there's actually a movie coming out that the guy who made Monster House is working on, Gil Keenan. You guys know who that is? Gil Keenan he's making a Five Nights at Freddy's horror film, and like I am just stoked because like go ahead.
I actually have a question for you. Have you ever played any of the Souls games? Dark Souls, Demon Souls?
I've only ever watched people play them. Brian,
I've played all of them.
I played them all. Fucking love those.
What you're describing right now as being the best parts of what you enjoy about Five Nights at Freddy's is essentially what all of the Souls games are about the entire way through. They're amazing.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that particular game. I just wanted to interject because that was like the only thing that like.
Not sure if I'm the only one, but I found the first Dead Space to be a very good horror experience for me.
That game was like too scary for me actually when I first played it.
The first Dead Space actually did creep me out. That was an excellent game.
A danger, I think, with the horror video games is if they make you powerful enough to defend yourself.
Yes.
That's what I loved about Among the Sleep. And for those who haven't played that or aren't aware of it, it's a game where you play as a toddler. And you basically explore. Well, I don't want to spoil it because I think people should watch it for themselves. But it's very much plays into that complete powerlessness. I mean, as a toddler, the only power you have is you can hold up your teddy bear, and he'll light things up a bit for you, and that's about it really. And it's all about again, that's a very psychological disempowerment thing where you have no means of fighting back against the horrors inside that game.
Yeah, I mean, like you should be able to hide You should be able to run away.
Yeah.
You should be able to try and figure out sort of where things are to some extent, but you shouldn't. It's like
You should never feel
you're dealing with
comfortable.
you're the rabbit, so like you don't know where the wolves are, right? The wolves are very, very good at being very quiet, or that owl that comes out of the sky randomly, and you're not going to know. And
But you also need that compulsion to explore and to move forward.
Oh, yeah,
That's the key
absolutely.
element to it, I think, for me.
Yeah, so like I mean, the rabbit, he needs to go around and he needs to get food or whatever creature, right? There are things you need to do to survive, but the simple act of going, to the watering hole in the savannah to take the water you need to live exposes you to the crocodiles and the lions. And they're going to make a point of not letting you know they're there. The crocodile is going to be just below the surface of the water waiting. The lion is going to be in the grass waiting.
Well,
That's a good idea for a series of games, I think, kind of a genre devoted to, or a series devoted to a psychological exploration of what it's like to play, to be an animal in a specific environment.
That sounds like a pretty cool concept.
Because the rabbit, the rabbit or whatever, like the gazelle or whatever, they can't do anything to defend themselves. All they can do is run away.
I think a more recent game of this would probably be Alien Isolation, which you felt powerless at so many points. At least when I played it, it was to me a very scary game because you felt
it was
really
like
powerless.
instant death, right?
Yeah, it was instant death when the alien found you.
So
The way it did it though is everything like you see these super strong robots in that game and they're like they're just unstoppable to you and you think God these things are awesome, but then the alien comes and just massacres all of them in seconds.
Okay, so Mario wanted to make a point?
Yeah, thank you. No, I was going to say, in my opinion, an excellent horror game, any of them in the genre, they have to have one thing that they do and that they do well, and that's that the player should at no point in the game feel comfortable. You should never have a feeling that you're able to walk down that hallway because you're so overpowered that nothing will happen to you. You should always be worried about what's around that corner or what could be lurking in the darkness of that open doorway. And the best horror games, I think, are ones that essentially keep you right on that edge. They keep you interested. They have a good story, but they make you always on edge. Like, for example, I'm still playing Bloodborne right now. It just happens to be the only game I have for my PS4. I just got it. But that game, I think, is fantastic for that. Because at no point in the game have I ever been so powerful that I'm not immediately worried about essentially instant death, and I don't really know what's around that next corner as I advance. Just kind of like...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say a couple things. One is I really like horror games where all of those things that you guys are talking about, they have them. I also really like the ones that they force you to go somewhere that you don't want to go. Like they basically tell you, you have to go here, and you can see that it's really fucked up, like that something is there that's unpleasant or scary. You are forced to confront something. For example, some of the Silent Hill games do that. Yeah, the Silent Hill games make you do that. They make you go into the place where the thing that you can't kill just went, or that you're tracking, you're going, approaching a creature that you have to because you have to proceed in order by doing that. And you don't know what you're going up against. You don't know if you can overcome it or how you're going to have to solve this issue. It's always meant to intentionally force you to confront your fears, essentially.
Right, well, it's a sense of fear and powerlessness combined that just...
Yeah, and it combines those things, right? Because you have, like, shitty equipment, your guy's not very good at what he does, and all that. Another one is the Fatal Frame games, where you actually have to face and photograph the ghosts, right? And you have to face them down long enough to defeat them with the camera, and it's really that's also a really good example. So I really like the horror games that put you intentionally face to face with what you have to deal with.
So what do you guys think about the first quarter of BioShock? Because like later on you get you get powerful, but like at the very beginning, you don't know what the hell is going on, and you don't really have anything that.
Well, okay, I was going to real quick. I was going to ask a question, but you're going to get me on a BioShock rant now, because BioShock was a horror game for me when I first played it. In fact, it was a game because I played it back when it came out in 2007, and I was pretty young back then, and it was terrifying. The splicers, the atmosphere, the music, just everything about it, like especially the whole setting of being completely isolated underwater and there's nowhere you can go. And I remember playing that game late at night, and just
Oh, sorry.
what was that?
Crazy.
We're being invaded by aliens.
Yeah, but just so BioShock was great. But I wanted to ask everybody here, what do you guys think is a more effective way of communicating horror, or like that idea of horror that we've been getting at? We're trying to get at here, that whole loss of power. Is it video games? Is it movies? Is it comic books? What do you guys think is the best medium for horror?
I think video games are the best.
Video games are the best medium for almost anything.
Yeah. Do you know what it is with video games? They can give you the power, then take it away. And that's much more powerful than being an observer of events that are happening. A game I'd like to bring up, well, a game series I'd like to bring into the discussion is the Max Payne series of games.
Ooh.
There are moments in there that are genuinely terrifying. One of them is that psychological expectation and suspense when you for those that haven't played it, I won't spoil it too heavily, but you have this inexorable march towards a horrific scene that is hinted at and then becomes more and more obvious what's going to happen, and that was very disturbing. And another one was there's a level where you are in a drug-induced state, and that was one of my favorite innovations in a video game of all time. That stands out as like a eureka moment in video game history for me, when they pretty much recreated the sensation of being on a hallucinogen within a game, and it was almost perfect.
And I think the key element there is that you are impaired, and yet there is some real material danger happening around you, and you have to deal with the fact that you are impaired, that you're at a disadvantage, and survive.
And to touch on what Wayne just mentioned, I should say, to answer the original question and to touch on what Wayne mentioned, as far as which medium I think is better for communicating horror, I would also agree that it would have to be video games, since you're not just a passive observer, and I think it actually has a more visceral impact as well, because just the fact that you're playing the game gives you a sense of empowerment. It makes you feel like you have choices, even when you don't. Even when the game is forcing you to do something that you wouldn't normally choose to do yourself, you still think you have a choice in the matter. And I think that when that choice gets removed and when you get forced into those situations, it's actually much more potent as far as the effect that it has on you, as opposed to a film where you're a passive observer. That was all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan.
It's one of the criticisms of common games. There's this move towards the freeform platforming games, and when you do that, you lose that illusion of choice that you have, and that's a big part of all games. The thing that is the one common element in every video game is you have some form of avatar that represents you, and you cannot help but channel a little bit of yourself into this. You project onto that avatar a little bit of yourself. No matter what that avatar looks like, whether you can relate to it physically or not, it's irrelevant. That avatar is your representation, and everything that happens to that avatar in the game is also happening to you. And a lot of games they give you the illusion of choice rather than actual choices to make, and that as a storytelling narrative, when you retain that tight control over that, it can make for a much better storytelling experience than if you just give the player a massive amount of decisions of things they can do and the freedom to do it in the order they want.
I completely agree.
So, Brian, was there something you wanted to say to add to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, speaking of, because you were talking about good horror games, and some of the really good ones do this thing where they take away your control, and there are also some. Well, there's one. Have you guys ever heard of Eternal Darkness?
Yes.
And
I have.
in this one, as your character becomes more insane, the game like breaks the fourth wall essentially, and it messes with your head as the player, and I find that is a really good way of like really creeping people out too, because they don't know what's. I mean, they don't know. Not only do they not know what's around the next corner, but they don't know what the game is going to do, and people have different experiences too.
So I kind of I wanted to, or did anyone else want to speak to that before I moved on?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think that Bloodborne or Dark Souls are horror games?
I would say Dark Souls are probably in the horror genre. Bloodborne, I don't know about Bloodborne.
I have a problem with calling those horror games, if only because I think you have the ability to defeat defeat the monster or whatever it is, and not just like in a sense of like tricking it and getting some sort of environmental factor to destroy it, but like you can literally, I mean, towards the end of those games, you're pretty much just like rustling the damn thing to the ground and beating the shit out of it.
So actually, sorry, I'm finished.
No. So, but like Jaws or whatever. I mean, yeah, they kill it, but you know, it was kind of bullshit, and they and it wasn't like they jumped in the water and said, "Come at me, bro."
I would say that they're definitely still horror games, though. I mean, they're within the genre. I mean, if for no other reason, the environments alone, the music, you know, all incredibly well orchestrated. I also think that, yeah, I mean, the not knowing what's going to come at you next thing, that's a huge part of what makes a horror game successful. The fact that you just can't OP your way through it on your first run, I think is a huge part of that. And you know, the mythos behind it, specifically for Bloodborne, it's all drawn from Lovecraft.
Well, okay, so what about this? What if parts of it, like BioShock, I only think the first part of BioShock is a horror game.
Once you get powerful.
Once I'm like throwing people around the room with like telekinetic powers and lightning from my fingers, and I've got all the guns and all the ammo.
Yeah,
I'm not scared anymore. And I also know what all the stuff is. Splicers are hanging from the ceiling, and I'm like, okay, come on, I'm bored, come down here.
Well,
and yeah.
I'd like to throw out one other point too about the Souls games. In defeating the monsters, it all becomes almost pointless, because in the end you become exactly what you have worked the entire time to defeat. So that's a pretty solid horror trope there, I would say.
Okay, so going back to the question we asked before about which is the better medium, I think we have a contrary opinion to the video games idea, and that's Magic. Magic, did you want to speak to that? No? Okay. Oh my god.
What the fuck?
Okay, so no, Magic doesn't want to speak to that. Moving on. Back to video games. So,
no, but seriously, I think that movie really you don't have any power over what's happening. So in a way, it's worse than it's better to communicate horror than video games, because you still have choice in video games.
But I would
is it less
disagree with
impactful?
that.
Is it less impactful though because you're not directly being affected in the same way that you are when you are channeling yourself into an avatar?
It depends on what kind of movie you're talking about.
Well, I mean, like, when we talk about choice,
I would agree with Wayne on that because the fact that you're a passive viewer in a film allows you to have more of a sense of detachment from it, whereas with a video game you're actively involved, so it has a stronger impact.
So, but like on the issue of choice, if you're the rabbit, right, and you're watching the rabbit versus controlling the rabbit, when the predator comes, what kind of choice do you really think you have? I mean, all you can do is like run in the opposite direction as fast as you can. That's your option.
Let me put it another way. What video game was doing a last impression of you that you can not watch a second time without being scared again? You know.
I mean, there are a lot of games where you'll hit the same situation over and over again.
Have some
it'll be creepy every time.
Yeah. I don't know. It depends because the horror comes in multiple forms. So yeah.
Well, there is also, I think, to consider that with a horror film, and I'm not making the argument that horror can do it better. I think that it has horror as a film can do it better, but I do think that horror as a film has some advantages because when you are playing a horror game, it's almost always from the perspective of the player from start to finish. But because that's the nature of, I mean, unless you have cutscenes or something, that's going to be the nature of the video game. Because you're in control.
And that's an aspect of video games that does actually draw heavily from the movies, is that like, cutscenes in games are the only way you can, or I guess you could have a brief spell of playing as a different character or from a different perspective, but it's usually done with cutscenes.
I mean, I'm sure that there are examples of that. But when you watch a film, you can see other people's experiences that are not the main protagonist that may add to the fear that you feel for the protagonist. So like you might see build up.
Does that not give games the advantage though because they can contain both?
They can, but I think that when a player goes into a cutscene, they kind of put the controller down. They're no longer engaged in that part of the experience. Like and you also, I think, I don't know. Like I mean, I think that an argument can be made that there are advantages that horror films can have, but I think that games overall have the edge, is what I'm saying. But I mean, I'm trying to see like what do films do that games don't do? And the only thing is that they can mess with your expectations in terms of not only what you're looking at, because you can be looking at it from any number of perspectives, but also even in terms of who you're supposed to be following or whose story is actually being told, if it's really written cleverly.
So it's about the fact that the storyteller has that complete control over your experience rather than having an element of control just by nature of being able to move a camera.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, like, you have to also, I think, consider that a lot of times screenwriters and directors are generally better at telling stories than programmers and game developers, although that is changing because there's a lot of overlap now. But one of the things that I've noticed in horror games, especially recently, is that you were talking about these games where you have no agency. I mean, you're in there and you're basically just running and hiding, right? Like Outlast, or what's the one that's like that, where essentially there are things stalking you and all you can do is hide from them.
Amnesia.
What was it?
Amnesia.
Yes, Amnesia, The Dark Descent, right? Like that's really a new trend, and a lot of that wasn't really common, because even in Silent Hill, which was probably one of the first games that was like, okay, you're in this scary situation and you suck at fighting zombies or monsters, because it was basically done as the scarier version of Resident Evil, where you were a cop and you had to manage your that's why they call it survival horror, because you had to manage all of your bullets and you didn't get much and all that, in the early ones anyway.
Okay, I'm going to take this in another strange direction. This is part of the thing for me. Who remembers playing hide and seek when they were a child? I'm sure everybody has some memory of doing that.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
this is the same kind of principle. There was actually there was a mod for Counter-Strike actually called Hide and Seek, where one team had literally no ability to fight back against the other team. So you had these massive sprawling maps where you had a load of places you could jump to and bushes you could hide in and buildings that had no lighting in them, and the other team had guns and were hunting for you. And they've done a similar thing with something like. Gary's mod has got, I forget what the name of the mod for that is, where you play as an inanimate object. You hide as an inanimate object, and the other team's got to come in and find you.
It's called Prop Hunt.
That's the one. So does that not? Is this not a new kind of developing genre that you can look at? Like, how does it change the dynamic when you introduce emergent gameplay with online play with other players?
I mean, I think horror, what you're trying to do is stimulate the amygdala, you know, that part of your brain that associates that snapping twig in the forest with the with a big cat that is quietly sneaking up behind you. And then you just hear that snapping twig, and you go, "Motherfucker!" and you bolt, or your ears prick up, and the hair on the back of your neck starts ruffling.
Like the fight or flight.
Yeah.
Is that why then? And I think that you're onto something. Is that why then more horror movies and are more so targeted towards female audiences, which is something that I mentioned in the show? I think they are. I think they are.
I would agree with that.
I think they are, and one of the reasons why is because women have larger amygdalas, and they respond more to that kind of, you know, self-preservation.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but everyone has had the experience of their girlfriend, like asking their girlfriend to a horror film and them not wanting to go. Am I right?
Yeah. And you know, like guys, I don't know if it's just because we have a higher tolerance for it, you know, which could be part of our evolutionary psychology. I don't know, where we're just like, that's not scary. You know, and it might just be gory, and it might just be, and it's not because, you know, we don't feel anything. It's just it doesn't trigger anything when as you get older, perhaps, or even as a young person, because you know, boys are generally, they're curious about stuff. They might like step on bugs. They might dig up worms. They like to look at these things, and girls are generally creeped out by that stuff. So
I mean, part of it is human beings specifically are. We've evolved to fight these things. We're not like male gazelles. Also, you know, right. we're male human beings, and we've had tens of thousands of years of going. Okay, lion, I've got a really sharp stick. You wanna go? Let's do it, dude.
I've got a counter to that, though. If we're going to base it on that psychology of, if you want to simplify it, the psychology of men being more prone to fight than flight, does that not maybe mean that horror movies are also catering to disempowerment of men in a stronger way because you don't have the option of fighting?
Right.
Maybe.
That's a good point.
Yeah, good point.
I would say it depends on the state of mind that you are in. I guarantee you, if you're 3 years old and you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, you will have nightmares about it. You know?
Well, like back to Jaws again. That wonderful monologue on the sinking of the Illinois, the USS Illinois, where the old captain talks about how his fellow sailors were dying one by one to sharks, and there was nothing they could do. They just hung on to little bits of debris and life rafts and tried to stay alive, but there was nothing they could do against the sharks.
So we're gonna move on to the last topic for the night. Appreciate everybody's opinions on games and stuff like that, but I wanted to talk about the indie horror scene in either games or movies.
Oh, okay.
So,
I've got a few opinions.
Mario, you want to start us off?
Sure. I can't remember the names of many of these films because they were kind of unremarkable, but they all shared a couple things in common, which was that it seems like it's been a growing trend with the indie horror films to purposely leave things open-ended and really, really vague in such a way that ends up frustrating the viewer. Like somebody brought up earlier the film It Follows.
I did.
Right. Okay, so I just watched that a couple weeks ago, and it made no sense. There wasn't a motive behind what was happening, and there was never any sort of exposition that occurred. So it seems like in these newer generations of, I don't know, I guess we can call them horror films, although they really aren't. To me, at least, that they end up having, the typical setup. You'll have the young protagonists. They'll, go out, have sex, do whatever, and you don't have the typical antagonist. There isn't ever anything that's truly evil or insurmountable that is coming for them. Instead, you end up with essentially a bunch of infighting throughout the film, which is more to create a sense of drama than any real dread. And I think they kind of miss out in that way. And I know it's not necessarily an indie film at all, but I really did think Cabin in the Woods was fantastic for what it did.
Me too.
I mean, I really appreciated the whole spin that it put on things. I mean, you thought it was going to go along with all the standard horror tropes, and it flipped all of those on their heads. I actually thought the end of it was fantastic. But as far as newer, I don't know if it's really indie, but the Insidious franchise, I actually did think was fantastic. It was a great story. The filming was consistent from the first movie all the way through the last, the most recent third one, and it kept a really good feeling of suspense all the way throughout. I would say that's a standout example.
Yeah, actually, Insidious is a great example because I never saw the second or the third one, but the first one has a feature that goes back to something we were talking about a while ago, which is the juxtaposition of real-life music with a horrifying scene. And if anybody remembers, there was a song that they used from Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim, actually, is what I was thinking
yes.
of. The Tiny Tim songs they used in Insidious 1. And then there was also that sort of, like, that horrifying creature that you don't know what it is, lurking in the shadows. There was also a little kid. They had a lot of tropes that they did really well on. That I think that they did an interesting twist on, and I don't know. That was it's not indie, but it's or at least it's not indie in the sense that like it was pretty mainstream, and I'm pretty sure it had a large budget. So I don't think you could count that as indie, but it was good. But as far as like indie movies go, do you guys think that are there any indie movies that stick out in your heads as doing something better? It doesn't have to be scarier than a mainstream horror film, but something that it does part of the genre specifically better.
I like the Babadook. I don't know if that counts as an indie film, but it played in a lot of the indie house theaters. And I like the Babadook specifically because a lot of horror movies are often about something other than just horror, right? They're about something. And the Babadook is all about, if you've never seen it, I like it a lot. You should check it out. It's about abusive parents. It's about child abuse at the hands of a mother. And that's something that you don't really get to see all the time. So,
it had the same vibe for me as Among the Sleep. It was that kind of that Jungian principle of confronting your own shadow.
Yes.
So does anyone else have any particular indie films that like come to mind?
like I said in the beginning, VHS is a pretty good indie film, in my opinion, because it took it tried to reinvent like the old Blair Witch find footage thing, and they did it pretty well. It's a blending of creep show and VH and found footage movie. So yeah.
That's on Netflix too. I gotta check it out.
All right. Well, does anyone else have any horror films that they wanted to speak out before we close this up?
I will say that a lot of new movies have good concept, but they are not fleshed out well. Like one example will be The Purge.
I thought The Purge was kind of lame, honestly.
You think The Purge is a horror movie?
I wouldn't even classify it as that. I found it to be a comedy movie.
Yeah, I know, but the
Right, but it
concept,
could've-
the
it could've been a
concept
horror
on
movie.
paper it could be good though.
Yeah,
I,
sure.
Just
I
it
actually
turned out
do
to be.
have one.
The
I
Purge-
actually do have one that's a couple years old.
Can I just ask a question about The Purge? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Do you think that, and I mean, I'm the kind of person that wonders if anything or if everything that's being put in the media has a political statement it's trying to make. Do you think that The Purge is trying to make a commentary about, I mean, I know that it's about anarchy in a way, but do you think that it really talks about anarchy in a way that is kind of fair to those people who are anarchists or that
No.
believe
Of
in
course not. Do you think that 2000 Maniac was about to represent like the Confederate flag people? Well,
Right, it's so like the same. It's like that idea of like people who say if you want like true libertarian paradise, go to Somalia or whatever.
yeah.
And I wonder if that's not what they're kind of saying with that film.
Well, I mean, also the I don't even know if it's necessarily a condemnation of anarchy, really, because the staging of the whole thing is, yeah, order goes away, but it gives anarchy a shove in the most destructive direction it can possibly go in, right before it goes there. So it's a little like, oh yeah, here guys, Stan, you're on your own now, but before that, I'm just gonna kick you off this ledge.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are two things. Okay, wait. Somebody remind me of the film we're talking about, so I don't lose my train of thought.
Purge.
Okay, so Purge. There are two things there. There is the assumption that everybody would do things like that. That everybody would, if given the opportunity, would go crazy. And I'm kind of two minds here because I've been exploring something recently. Is there more crazy people than there are sane people? So if given the option, would there be more people? Okay, well, there would obviously be more people who wouldn't. But how much of an epidemic would there actually be with the people who would? Because there are people that would. Specifically, and this is speaking to the horror, but this is real horror, the deep web. There is some really messed up crap that goes on in the deep web, and like there are some messed up people out there. So what do you guys think? Do you think that if given the actual concept of the Purge, if it was real, would there be an epidemic of those freaks on that day, or do you think it would just be a non-issue and that it would mostly be?
I think there absolutely would.
Let's Brian, go ahead. You were first.
Oh, I didn't say anything. Somebody, I mean, I have a thought, but somebody else wanted to say something first. I'll let them go.
Mario, did you want to go?
Oh, I was just agreeing. I think they absolutely would. I mean, the ability to do unspeakable things completely free from consequence. I think you'll find that even the most reserved, people have some pretty dark fantasies. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be a pretty widespread thing.
What about emergent crowd behavior when you get like looters and rioting and things like that? I mean, that's an example of how it can just happen.
That's what I was about to talk about. Where okay, fine, you get the chaotic nonsense going around with the people with their pitchforks and their whatever, but then the people that are not going crazy, they get afraid, and they start taking precautions. So they start being careful where they go. They start moving in packs. There's a reaction. So the anarchic danger instantly creates an emergent organization in the non-hostile population,
Like,
where
come
they
on.
all kind of
Dead.
click together to protect each other.
Yeah.
And so then it ends. So like, okay, fine, society went away, blah blah blah. But then it's like back within 10 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say you can look at some real life examples of this kind of thing, like in I don't know. Like my question would be, what percentage? I know the deep web is really messed up. I've never gone there, but what percentage of the population do you think the deep web represents? I would guess a small number of people. I think
There's also it's a lot of trolls. So I mean, there are people that will say they're going to do something or will talk about it, but a lot of it is they're full of crap.
yeah. Well, there is that too.
Yeah, in the case of the purge, you look at it from the one day's perspective, but towards the rest of the years, I think that people would get more and more radicalized, because of this day. So that's
Either
another.
that or they would start being an awful lot nicer to each other.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, that
Well,
would be another
do
aspect to consider.
you mean that kind of psychological shared guilt reaction where there's like an overcompensation?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say so, because if you have one set day where you know that there will be complete anarchy and people can do anything they like with no consequence, it's going to force you to behave in a more civilized manner and to actually be, I would venture, it would force you to be more polite and understanding of your fellow human beings, because there would always be that nagging worry, I guess, that really kind of tense feeling in the back of your mind where you don't want to offend anybody, because if you do, they can come for you.
So for you, it's more the self-preservation concept than it is about any kind of retroactive looking back at the situation.
I think for most people it would be that way. For myself, I wouldn't
So
necessarily
you
change
want
anything.
you would not take some like crazy party that would took the nukes at the military station and try to take over the country like in one day or something.
It's always a possibility, but I'm sure that
I have
military would mobilize at that point.
No,
Kimo,
but
I
if
have, I have
everything
another
is,
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the purge. I guess. Do you guys think that the way the purge sort of predicts how things would happen is realistic? Because, for example, Will was talking about how people would sort of form their own sort of organizations anyway. So since with the purge, it's like everyone sort of knows beforehand X day is going to be this purge day. People really just gonna just not, wouldn't they like try to stockpile guns, or I don't know, just create some sort of vigilante sort of system?
Or like leave town or something. I mean, screw this nonsense. Like,
Yeah,
for example, I lived through the Los Angeles riots, and when that started, school was closed, and my parents, their reaction was, they're like, well, we're just going to go on a vacation, and we got in the car and we left town, and we came back when the nonsense was under control.
Right.
You know.
All right. Well, if that's all for tonight, I think we're gonna close up the show because I unfortunately have some things that I need to do. So I would just
Can
like
I
to
throw
thank.
one last thing out there?
Yes, you may.
If none of you have ever watched a film called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon, that's an independent kind of horror film that I think everybody owes it to themselves to see. It's a little bit scary, it's a little bit funny, it exposes a lot of tropes, and it's a great watch.
All right. Cool. So that's something we'll check out then. So I just wanted to thank our few viewers and all of our guests today for joining us on another episode of Triggered. And tune in maybe this week for a possible special guest appearance with a mystery guest. Anyway, everybody, take care. Goodbye.